Welcome back to the Big Fish Little Fish podcast. I'm here with my co-host Teo DeBress, and it hasn't been that long since we've done our last podcast. It's been a little while, but the world has changed a lot since our last podcast. There's been ups for some people and down for others, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what this means and how it's being approached and how people should take it. So. Did you want to get right into, well, let's get into it. The very first big thing that we've been talking about is the election. Donald Trump is the president. Controversially so, only in the sense that people are upset about it. Not in the sense that I think everyone is kind of like just taking it for face value. He is the president-elect. And a lot of people have taken it completely different ways. Some people are thrilled about it. Some people are not so thrilled, to say the least.
Very few that are non-reactionary.
Yeah.
Most people are, probably more so than any presidential election I feel like I've been a part of in my lifetime. And granted, some were kids, but I do think this was the most polarized election that we've ever gone through. If you were to compare this election to any other election that I've been alive as a millennial, most divided we got to the election day. And I think that, like you said, at least, we'll talk about this, but at least there wasn't any major drama about it. You know, people feel one way or the other, but there wasn't any incident or anything like that.
Yeah, no, there's been no incident as of November 9th, and hopefully there won't be, right?
Is that what we're doing? Is going to just keep updating and to be like, incident happened or didn't happen?
Only because, well, here's why, though. Prior to this election, there weren't a lot of assassination attempts on presidents since, like, really solid assassination attempts, probably since Reagan.
I don't think we were alive for that.
No, we weren't alive.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, with Trump, as he was running for presidency, he had one crazy attempt that was almost successful, and then he had a guy show up at I think it was Mar-a-Lago, wherever, I believe it was like a golf course.
Is that a golf course?
Yeah, and they were trying to assassinate him there. And then now we're hearing something with
Iran's
which
late breaking.
Which is a foreign entity trying to take out a president, or a president-elect, former president. It's a bit shocking. So I think the world is kind of looking at this whole situation like, okay, he's president. Is he going to make it to office? Which is sad that that's the type of world we live in, but it's the reality of the situation. So hopefully we get to see him actually take office and not, have something.
Yeah, the type of event
happen
that would have to stop that. We don't want those things to happen.
No.
That's not a good day.
Yeah, that disrupts the transition of power, which is one of the most amazing things about America. The fact that we can have transitions of power that don't get overblown into civil war.
Yeah. I feel like everyone was on the edge of their seats, and we all felt like there was a lot of like weird things that were like leaning that way. And I don't know how everyone felt, but there was like we've talked about this. Think about the different episodes we've had on the pod. We've had movies talking about it. We've had dialogue in the populace talking about it. We've had just kind of just like it hinted at in the media. Is this going to cause things like that? And when that happens, I'm not saying you're speaking it into existence, because obviously you have to be aware of what's going on, but also like it just seemed like so many people were like thinking it was trending that way, and it's like that's a really bad day. Like the election's over. Hopefully, like didn't they say this at one point and they were like, cool the temperature in the room. Let's cool the temperature in the room.
Yeah.
Let's have a time where America starts coming back together. We can all start kind of moving towards a common goal. We don't want to keep getting divided. I mean, it's just like in terms of all the risks out there, and we have so many to deal with in this country in terms of foreign adversaries, the one that we can control the most is that we come together internally. Because a stronger internal country is way better than a divided one. Let's show unity and strengthen unity as a country, and then I think it actually will deter a lot of the foreign adversaries we have. So by coming together, we not only have a better country, but we're actually preventing enemies from feeling emboldened. Like, if nothing else, let's do that. Like, cool it down.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as crazy as it sounds, because it's kind of ironic, because of the election results, it's kind of become a very divisive topic among friends, family, coworkers, acquaintances. It's becoming a topic. Like, who did you vote for? And it's like, okay, like, yeah, you have the freedom to ask that. But I think with the temperature being that it is, it's a little bit, it's a little bit of an abrasive topic to just go ahead and start asking people unprovoked who you voted for, and then on top of that, being like, if you voted for the right or the left person, I can't be involved with you. And I would just, I guess what I'm about to say is, I remember the election day going on Instagram, and as I'm looking through my news feed and looking through my stories, there was one thing that I thought like was a good sign. And it was that a lot of people in my generation, which is like the millennials, they went out to vote. And I thought that was awesome. And then what was interesting was who everyone voted for. As I was scrolling through Instagram stories and Facebook, I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't think this person would be aligned with Trump. Oh, interesting. I didn't think this person would be aligned with Harris. But you kind of got a peek into how people viewed things politically, whether in someone's opinion, good or bad. And it made me think, oh, like, you can't judge a book by its cover, nor should you judge a book by its cover. You should, at the end of the day, like, regardless of who someone voted for, at least I didn't start being like, oh, you know what? I'm going to look at this person differently. I'm not going to treat them differently. I'm going to act towards them differently. Like, it didn't change any way I viewed anybody. But it did make me think, okay, it is important to be cautious and kind to people regardless, because I saw a lot of people who, they got divided over this election. And it doesn't, if you think about it, it doesn't make sense. And the reason I say that is because ultimately, regardless who one individual votes for, we only have so much outside of a vote that we can actually control in what happens in this country. I mean, we've seen this almost with every single administration that's ever come to fruition in the United States. All these politicians promise the world, but then what actually gets implemented is only a fraction of what they promise. No administration has come in and been like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and then they were able to do it, right? You can just go through your history books, look at all the promises that have been made, and how none of it, or many of the things, were not done. And to be like, I'm going to end friendships over false promises politicians are making, or cut off family, is absolutely bananas to me.
Yeah, it almost happened like an immediate reaction to the results. Election day was so weird. You started the day not knowing who was going to be our president, and by the next day, people were like, hey, I can't associate with you if you feel this way or that way. Like, what are we talking about here? That every single one of us has so much more control over ourselves and our person than the government ever will be able to, like, tell you. Like, we are a community of people. The government is just the collection of people. That's all it is. It's the collection of people, and we elect people, and they go up there and they go to represent us. So when we have issues with the government, we really need to be looking at kind of like who we are as a society and what we're doing individually to contribute, and are we coming together? Like, those are the important factors. The person who gets elected there hopefully is going to execute on the policies that are getting implemented. But at the same time, we're still there's so much more of our life we're in control of, and that's the part we can control. Having friendships end over something that we can't even control anymore makes no sense. And if they were your friend before you voted for someone, why would that change because of how they voted? I just don't understand it. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say one thing to keep top of mind, regardless who would have won this election or who has won this election, regardless of who won the election, you're still going to have to pay the same bills. You're still going to have the same job. You're still going to have the same responsibilities. You're still going to have to breathe the same air. You're still going to have the same mental health problems, the same health problems. None of those things take a drastic change. All of those things are going to be the same as they were the day before the election and the day after the election. And chances are they're going to be the same regardless of what administration's taking place, unless you work in politics. And then that might actually directly impact you. But they're going to be the same unless you change them. Because just like Taylor said, ultimately, everything you do is in your control, at least in this country. There are some countries where literally the administration will change things so drastically for you that you will be completely like, it's not on you. Like if you live in a communist country or a real third world country where the government's going to do a complete overhaul, a true complete overhaul, not an exacerbated one, right? A true overhaul where they're actually going to take away every single right that you have, your right to own a business, your right to defend yourself, your right to be an entrepreneur, your right to have freedom of speech. Like all of those things are not going to be stripped from you. And if you think about that, because there are so many countries where you can't say whatever you want, you can't create any business you want. That is what real dictatorship looks like, you know? That's why, like, sometimes when I hear things where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, now that whether it's Republican or Democrat, because I heard it from both sides. Each side that says, oh, if this person gets elected, if that person gets elected, we're going to lose everything. And it's like, okay, like there may be the government or the country leaning towards one direction, but like there's real countries in the world that actually have a complete overhaul of the economy and the government where things get destroyed. I mean, like the same people who tell you, oh my gosh, the world's ending. Nothing's gonna be good now that Trump is elected. They're like, now that Trump is elected, everything is destroyed. The world is over. You know, the same people saying that were saying, hey, if you stop COVID lockdowns, everyone's gonna die. That's what they said. That's the same people warmongering all this stuff. The same people were like, oh, we have to get involved in Afghanistan and in Iraq because they're weapons of mass destruction, right? They make people have an insane amount of fear, you know? And I mean, these are the same people who in 2016, they said, you know, if Trump's elected, we're going to have World War III. And I remember that was a real thing I was concerned about in college. I was like, man, are we going to have World War III if this guy's elected? I didn't really know. Didn't happen. You know, I mean, it's like there's always this thing, no matter who's elected, that the country's going to fall apart. They did the same thing with Obama when I was in high school. They're like, if Obama gets elected, the country's going to fall apart. Country was fine. The country made it through it. We had 8 years of Obama. Some things got better. Some things got worse. I mean, it's this thing that happens that, unfortunately, I think my generation really, for whatever reason, half of us has figured out that the media lies and they just say things to freak us out. And the other half, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because of the media or social media, but they take this stuff to heart. You know, anybody who is a reasonable person that has seen the cycles of the right and the left having power has seen that no matter who loses, the other side is going to be like, this is the end of democracy.
Yeah.
This is the end of you having, just insert whatever the hot topic is. That is the thing. I remember they were saying, hey, 2016, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, the government deficit is going to go out of control. Newsflash, Trump got elected. The government deficit is still out of control. Yeah. That didn't change. I remember that's what they were telling my generation. They're like, oh my gosh, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, like, your generation's going to be stuck with figuring out the deficit. Trump got elected. We're still stuck with the deficit. I'm sure if Clinton got elected that time, we'd still be stuck with the Some problems are so big, it doesn't matter who's in charge. It's going to happen. And it's going to take some radical change, not just at the presidential level, but like almost all forms of government, as well as the people getting behind something to actually change the issue that's at hand. So I don't know. I just think a lot of things are blown out of proportion.
And that's what I was saying. Like the divisiveness that we have on this election is the biggest one I've ever seen. And it's like, it got so crazy that like this election was nuts. We had things from presidential assassination attempts to transitions of candidates in the middle of the election to pre-dialogue about there being potential civil war in our country, like all the way to we won't know the election results for a while and there could be, crazy things that happen with it. It's like going into this was by far the most nervous I've ever been about an election, not because of the election, but because of everything else that came with it. Like the rhetoric got crazy. People were talking about it seemed like both sides were saying this was it. Like both sides made the case that this was the it. Whether if you were a Democrat, if Trump got elected, it was the end of the world, or if you were a Republican, Kamala getting elected is the end of the world. Everyone put all their chips in on the table and they're like, you got to vote for ours, and there's no middle ground at all. You have to be extremely one or extremely the other. There is no middle ground on this election, which is like, I don't want to do that anymore. I really don't. I don't want to have any more elections where I feel like between the two candidates, it's the end of the world if my option doesn't win. I want to have one where I'm like, I really like this person, but you know what? That person's actually pretty good too, but I just like my person better. As opposed to feeling one way is the only way out and the other way is the end of the world. We got to come back a bit. I think this whole thing has gotten a little bit crazy. The politics is a bit out of hand. Like we really need to bring it back to a level of just dignity to the process. I get it. Everyone got real intense on this last time, but let's bring some dignity back and let's actually start bringing forward candidates that people can get behind, that aren't as divisive as they've been over the period of time we've had.
Yeah. And Taylor makes a good point with the bringing good candidates and kind of like putting in perspective and like keep in perspective. These politicians, no matter who you elect or who you're rooting for, like the perspective to keep is that whether they do or don't get elected, they're not worried about you at the end of the day. They don't know you exist. They don't care if you got good sleep last night. They don't care if you got paid. They don't care if you have a job. They don't care if your parents' health is doing well. They don't care if your relationships are healthy. They don't care about you. They don't know you. They'll go to their rallies and they'll shake your hand. And they'll send, if they get your address, they'll send you mailers to send them donations. They don't really care about you. And this isn't just like one candidate. I'm talking about both candidates. Like they care about their political position. They care about keeping their power, putting their people on, and maybe for good reasons. But like ultimately, keep it in perspective. Ultimately, you need to be worried about yourself and your close circle of friends and family, like, and realize like, yeah, there may be differences. Like that goes into life. Everyone's different, especially in America. Like this is the melting pot where we have people of different races, ethnicities, religious cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds. I mean, treating someone bad or cutting ties with them based off of a political decision or a political vote is as crazy as treating someone bad for their race, ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic status, like a caste system or something. It's literally just as bad. You're not any better. You have just found a new reason to treat a group of people bad. Congratulations. It's impressive because it's like you thought we already found all the things to discriminate on each other for, but no, a new one's been found.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's the worst thing. I really I knew things were bad, but I didn't realize like how bad things were going to get until I'm like looking online and I'm seeing all these people being like, oh my gosh, if you are in any way, shape or form supporting Trump or friends with Trump supporters or anything like that, I don't want anything to do with you. Even if you're family, would you say that to your mom, the person who birthed you, or your dad, especially if you had good parents? Or what about a brother that's always been there for you? Would you do that to them? Or a sister, someone who's always had your back, but now suddenly because some people on a political aisle have made you feel so connected with them, like they're going to take care of you. Hey, listen, the next time you're late on a bill or about to get elected or about to get evicted, who are you going to call? Are you going to call the Republican Party or the Democrat Party? Or are you going to call your mom? Are you going to call your brother or your best friend or your old best friend that you said you don't want to have anything to do with, But now you need them. I mean, I think people are short-sighted when they say things like this. They're like, I'm never going to need these people again. I'm like, okay, maybe you won't. Maybe you won't. But is that really the way to live your life? I mean, look at like societies in the past and how things are done now. Can you imagine if like the United States was like, we are not going to do any business with a communist country. Like, they are so politically different than us. I'm not like, we wouldn't do business with China. We would be screwed. Or imagine if China was like that. Like, we don't want to do business with capitalists. No one would be there to buy their products, you know? But that's the thing. Those are two countries that are on completely different sides of the political aisle that recognize they need each other to coexist. Their economies are intertwined. You know, that's what people are doing. They're like, I'm not going to work with that side anymore. Like, what are you talking about? We're in the same country. We share the same land.
The thought that people would just go to sleep one day and wake up the next day and say, half of the country, 150 million Americans, I can't be associated with you anymore. Like, what? The country is divided in two. But if you completely put the other political party out of your space of who you'll interact with, you're literally cutting yourself off from half of the country. That's crazy. That's like saying that you can function, then why don't we have two countries? You don't do that. We are one country that has many ideas, and we work together to have the best possible result for the country. If we're going to turn around and say half the country can't interact with half the country, that's not a country anymore. We all have to be a United States of America. And for the fact that people are doing that, looking at the nation, maybe you get that kind of convinced this is a big deal that half of them. But when half of those people are actually your family and friends, you're not only cutting out half of the country, you're cutting half of your life out potentially. You never know. Families can have many different viewpoints and thoughts. It's very rare to have a family where everyone thinks the same. That's what makes families so special. The thing that makes a family special is that all of these different people can come together and have a unique bond that is stronger than anything. Family is first. It's God and family. That's what America is about to me. You have God running the country, God that's we are in God's favor. We are a nation under God, and we are a family. The United States of America. Everything has to do with unity. And your family is the building block. That's how this society works. You are an individual in a family, in a town, in a city, in a state, in a country. You are trying to be as connected to as much of all of that as possible. And it starts with you and your family. The two you can control the most is you and your family. And to say that you're going to cut people out of your family and your friends and your direct network, that's not a community anymore. We're a community after a family. And we have to remember that.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, I'm going to tap into a specific group right now, a specific group, the Christian group. And I'm going to tap in. Listen, if you're Christian, start praying. Pray for the country right now. The country's hurt. At least one side is hurt. And we need to pray that we can come together. We need to pray for the mental health of the people who honestly are emotionally and mentally devastated. Pray for healing. Pray for understanding. Pray for people to come back to common sense. And pray to end the wars. I think that was one of the things that no matter who's the president right now would have solutions for. How do we end the war in Ukraine without prolonging it, without having to send billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars? How do we end the conflict with Israel and Gaza? How do we cool things in the Middle East? How do we cool things with Taiwan and China? Like, how do we do a little de-escalation? How do we get to that? And I think the only way to get to that right now is to start praying. So for the Christians out there, ask God for healing. Ask God for a time of peace and for a time of building back, you know?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important is whether you were happy at the election result or whether you were devastated at the election result. The one thing we all need to keep in mind is that individual, the president, nor any individual elected to our political positions, any of that matters more than is our nation in favor with God? Are we actually a nation that has submitted to and found the favor of God, and he will bless that nation? And that's more important than anyone who's making the decisions. I honestly hope that that is influential throughout our government, is that we find a way to find the favor of God. Like, if without that, without our people and our nation and our individuals and our families finding that we only succeed if we are in God's favor, that we all keep that as perspective. That all of this other stuff is completely just noise compared to the much bigger issue, which is how we are spiritually. So I don't know. I think it's a thing that probably didn't get talked about at all during this election season. At least I didn't see it getting talked about a lot, but it's far more important than any of that. How's the health of our nation? Mentally, we need to be a strong nation on every level. It's mental, it's physical, and it's spiritual. If those three things, if our people don't have good physical, mental, and spiritual health in this nation, the nation's not healthy. We need to be in a place where we're all trying to find the best versions of us we can be in those things.
Yeah. We need that. And like I mentioned, Christians need to pray for this transitional time, that this is a smooth transition, because if we have too much turbulence, it's gonna open an already open wound even further. And we just need, when January 20th to come in, no more riots, no more people freaking out and trying to cause a disturbance with the transition of power. I was just watching the earlier today, the 2016 Obama and Trump meeting as Trump was getting ready to take over. Obama was helping him transition. So hopefully, Biden and Trump can have a good discussion as that happens. And we can just keep moving smoother, because, and I've said this before, the United States is like the last hope for the world in some ways. We are a nation that is capitalist, which allows people to innovate, to start companies, start businesses, create generational wealth that can go from family to family, generation on generation, as well as, for the most part, from what we can tell, a democratic republic that allows people to vote in and vote out candidates. As well as, because of all of those things and our military prowess, we, in some ways, keep the world from being in too much war. I know we get involved in things we shouldn't, but things could be a lot worse if we weren't around. If this goes down, it all goes down. The world goes into chaos. We are a superpower that has kept things in check. We are not what we used to be, in the sense of we're constantly growing and getting new territories. We've been a very relatively neutral factor in the sense of actually acquiring new places. There hasn't been too much expanding from major superpowers since we've come to power. There has been some, but not an insane amount like there used to be, especially after World War II. I think we need to really, really, all Americans, recognize that what we have in America is special. And it's going to take a lot to stop that, undo that, and all of that. So, I don't think this is something one person or one administration can do. It's especially because, remember, we have checks and balances, okay? If one branch of the government starts acting tyrannical, we still have two other branches that can check it, and have checked it for different presidents at different times. Because there have been more than one president that people felt were acting a little bit outside of the scope of their authority, and they've been checked. We have the Supreme Court and we have Congress. So keep that in mind. And we also have the deep state now. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's some perspective. I think every American can appreciate they're American. It's the type of thing where it's I know that there are things that come up in America, but I wish there was more of a just global awareness of how blessed we are to be in America. I think sometimes Americans lose sight on the fact that we wake up the most blessed people in the world to have this opportunity to be in this country. America is the place where families have taken so much sacrifice and so many steps just to have an opportunity to get here. And I feel like at times people forget to be appreciative of what we have. Yes, we have disagreements. Yes, we have times where we're not always going to align on everything we do. But at the same time, we wake up in a country where you have the freedoms that the country gives you, and that gives you an opportunity. And that's really all a country can give you. When you start looking for your country to give you more than an opportunity, I think you're looking for too much from your government. Your government gives you an opportunity, and if you have that, you are the master of your fate. You control your destiny. And we all control our own destiny, and we all impact the lives of the people around us. So let's not divide ourselves with that. Let's not look at all the things that you may feel are wrong with America, but understand that this country is the greatest social experiment that's ever been done, and we need to do our part to keep improving on it. Okay if it's not great, but are you taking steps in your everyday life to impact your community? Because I guarantee you, you have far more impact over your community than your government does. You can do things and create relationships and create bonds with your friends and business owners and people in your community that is far stronger than any enforcement a government can put on you. We forget that. We have the power by creating strong bonds in our community. We're not supposed to be this top-down government that impacts all of our lives. That wasn't the intention of the founding fathers. If the fact that the president being elected is so influential that we all feel like we're not blessed to be in this country or have an impact over our lives, then we need to look around and say, has the government gotten too big? Are we happy to see a smaller government moving forward? Because this is the risk of a big government. One way or the other, you're not happy with it. Why don't we start stripping back our expectations of our government, stripping back our reliance on our government, and increasing our independence and relationship with our community? You do that, and I think you have a far better chance at being successful in this country than sitting around and saying the government is going to control me in my life. Like, we in America are free to move as we want to. And if we create the bonds in our community and the relationships in our community that we need to be successful, we can make that happen, regardless of the government. The government shouldn't be that involved in our lives that we don't have an opportunity to create the individual community we're in a manner we want. But that takes you being in charge of taking the steps to be a leader in your community. How many people are complaining about what the government's doing, but not being leaders in their community? Impact your community. And then worry, like if the government gets in the way, then we deal with that. But don't let the government get in the way when you have so much influence around you. Every single American is so powerful individually. And then if you get enough Americans together, you have a strong group. And if even more get together, you have an even stronger group. And if you get enough together, you have a strong enough group to influence this country. That's what this country gives you, is the opportunity to create relationships that you can control your fate. Other countries say, we're the government, this is what we do, you cannot have any adversarial acts against it. This country allows you to create a collection of minds that you agree with. And why are we not more interacting with each other? We're so stuck on online that we're actually losing out on building relationships with the people in our lives around us. Who you live around, it's such a strong bond. I don't know. I'm kind of going on a side tangent. We need to have more reliance on ourselves and less reliance on the government, period.
Yeah, I agree. I think also, I know there's an immigration issue in the country, and I understand that. But because of that, I think regular Americans, outside of the new people who have immigrated here within the last 10 years, Americans lose sight of the fact that this country is so great. People are coming from around the world to try to get here, whether legally or illegally. They want to be here. People are complaining so much about this country, how much they hate this country, how much if one group is in power or another group is in power, this country can't be great. And it's you don't hear about all the people all around the world rushing into North Korea.
Yeah.
They're not rushing into just name one of the not top 10 countries in the world. They're not. it's not like an insane amount of people.
Even some of the top 10 countries.
Yeah,
people
even
are
some
like,
of
I
the
don't want to
top
go
10,
there.
Like, I don't know how many people are necessarily trying to illegally get into China. Like, you don't see drove of Central Americans trying to get into China. You don't see droves of people in. Listen, you just don't see droves of people trying to get into any place the way they try to get into the United States.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously there's immigration happening around the world, but if people didn't have an ocean between them and us, we'd have an even bigger immigration problem, because that's how amazing this country is. We don't have an immigration problem because this country's terrible. We have an immigration problem because this country's great. Yes, I understand. We have an immigration problem. That's going to be like addressed one way or another by each administration. But the reason it's a problem is because the place is so great. People want to be here. People come from different countries and they're like we talk so much crap about our public school systems, but our public school systems overshadow the public school systems in most parts of the third world. They just do. Even our worst schools are better than some of the average or best schools in a lot of the third world countries. Like, that's why they're like, oh my gosh, my kid can go to a school in America. You know, it's like a big thing for them, as well as like everything else, you know, like the opportunities for work, the opportunities for building something, buying property. I mean, there's certain places in the world where, like, unless you're like literally a natural born citizen, you can't purchase property, or even a natural born citizen in a specific ethnic group, you can't purchase property. And here we let everyone buy a home as long as they qualify, as long as they have the means to purchase. You could literally be a foreign investor and buy a whole bunch of land in the United States.
It's true. America is the one. And you know, one of the most influential things that has changed my perspective, I guess it hasn't really changed my perspective, but one of the most influential things that has given me perspective about America is actually being the child of an immigrant. I do think that there's something that happens when you're a child of an immigrant where you look around and you hear their perspective on what the opportunity America is. And I think Americans sometimes take that for granted. We forget, because if you were born here and you grow up here and your parents were born here and grew up here, you almost get like desensitized to what America is, because you don't see that people are leaving their homes. They will pack up everything they have and come to America because of the opportunity it presents them or their family. They'll go to countries and work and leave their family to work there, to build up enough money to bring their family to America. America is a place where people will disrupt their entire existence just for the opportunity it gives. And then we walk around as Americans sometimes and we act like this is the worst place in the world. I mean, yeah, the politics has gotten divisive, but at the end of the day, this is still a country that people are doing anything they can to get here. And we're here. We're in America. The dice were rolled and we won because we were born in America. And we have the opportunity to create whatever destiny we want with it. Other countries, you don't get that. Your dice were rolled, you were selected to be born in a country, and your ceiling was there. But in America, there is constantly new features that are being accomplished in this country. There are people accomplishing things that have never been done. That's why people look at America so often. They're like, their people are always doing something new, something that hasn't been done, something no one else thought was possible. America has always been on the forefront of leading the world. And if that's what we are, and that's where we're born, how can we not be grateful for this? How can people not be proud to be in the country that people will uproot their entire existence to come to? How can we not see that there's opportunity all around us? And yet we turn around and we complain and we look at politicians like they're in control of us. Yeah, they do policy. Yeah, they do regulation. But you control your future and your destiny because you're in America. Other places, you don't get that chance. I'm proud to be an American.
Same, brother. We're deep into this pod. We've done one subject, which I'm not mad at. We got to get to the next subject.
All right, I got one last question for you on this.
No, you're good.
I'll go first, and then it'll give you time as I'm going on it to try to think about it. I'm going to put you on the spot, okay? Well, I'm going to say, just start thinking about what your top 3 takeaways, if you had to put them on the spot, your takeaways from the election were, okay?
Okay.
Start thinking. I'll give you mine first, so you have time to think. All right. So, a lot happened. A lot happened from before all the way up to it. But here are the top 3 takeaways I have from the 2024 election. 1, legacy media is dead. I think that it was really interesting to see that far more influence was given, and people were far more influenced by the messaging that was getting delivered on non-legacy media outlets than legacy media was. Legacy media has kind of crashed off, and I think it's kind of evident by the fact that both sides were painting a story, and there's only one reality. And when you have people being told that one thing is definitely going to happen, or it's going to be close, or whatever, and the other thing happens, then you are in an echo chamber, because the reality of the world was far different than what one side was saying. Like, they are telling the people, this is media, this is the news, we are the source of information, and they got it completely wrong. They were way off basis as to what the real world is happening. And at the same time, I think that people are tired of seeing figurehead politicians that just go on legacy media outlets and they have edited interviews. I truly think for this election and every election on, people want to know the candidate and hear their extended thought. And that's why there were so many people who had influential. I really think the elected officials will be far more influenced by how you're reaching people via podcast than they will legacy media. If you're not going on the major media outlets, a Joe Rogan, a Sean Ryan, a Bill Maher, a PBD podcast, you can go down the list, but that's where people are spending their time. People don't log on to CNN anymore. People don't log on to Fox anymore. Millennials, all the way down to Gen Z, they're a podcast generation. They want to hear your full thought out thoughts. And that, to me, shows that legacy media has been dying, but it's dead. There is no more future in it, and people will want to hear, because of what we can do now with technology, directly from the people or from a person you trust to have an extended conversation with them. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we need to secure our voting system. I think we should all be somewhat grateful that this wasn't a close race. And I'm not saying that because you had to like the results or not, but I think Americans forget, going into the day of the election, we were all really scared of a close result. We knew that if there was a close result either way, there was going to be a lot more drama. And because we were fortunate to have a definitive result, we didn't have to rely on Arizona or Nevada or Arizona or what was the third one? Arizona or Nevada or New Mexico. Those took days longer to finish. Could you imagine if it was coming down to those states and we had to wait 3 more days for the results? That's a very different situation we're in, and we have 4 years to have everyone every state should be giving results the night of the election. We have 4 years in America to figure out a system where we make that happen. It doesn't sound like that complicated to me, that every state looks at their current voting process and says, we need to shore this up so that all the votes are counted on the night of the election. If we do that, then we don't have to worry about going into next days and if it's super close and all that. You have closure for the American people the night of the election. 4 years. We got through this last one. Let's fix it for the next one. And number 3, we need to tone down the rhetoric. We talked about this where the rhetoric was getting so crazy that it seemed like the country was on the line either way you were going to vote. And because of that, the stakes got way too high. We need to have a rhetoric that is based on reality. And the reality is that we have a political system that continues to churn because the American system is set up with checks and balances. We need to have faith in the American system that that's going to happen and stop with the end of democracy talk. And both sides did it. We need to only be focusing on what is critical, which is what are the best policies that will be good for our people. And the rhetoric about end of democracy on both sides being said has nothing to do with the policies you're bringing to make our American citizens' lives better. So let's focus on those topics moving forward. And I think it will actually unite the country, and a united country is a stronger America, and a stronger America is a more secure America. So those were the 3 things that I thought. I didn't know what I was going to take away from the election. Those were the 3 where I was like, moving forward, looking forward, as opposed to always looking back. Looking forward, this is what the country needs to focus on.
Wow. That's good. That's good. Okay. thank you for giving me time because I thought of 3 good ones myself, and I'm glad we're chopping it in like this. I wish you'd give me a little more of a heads up so I could have really followed through with some of these thoughts.
But I'm sorry.
Honestly, it's fine because I'm just gonna go a little off the dome with this. So
I like it. Freestyle.
Apologies if we haven't made this real worthy. I'm gonna do my best.
It's not what it's about.
Not what it's about. So, anyways, here are my 3 takeaways from the 2024 election. Number 1, nobody cares about celebrity opinions anymore. People actually called me and said, did you know LeBron endorsed Kamala Harris? And I said, I'm an adult. I don't give a fuck what LeBron thinks. People were also like, did you know Hulk Hogan endorsed Trump? I was like, no, dude, I'm an adult. I don't give a fuck what Hulk Hogan thinks. I care about what's important to me and my family. And I also think people, like before, I think celebrities were idolized because you didn't know them. Now people know celebrities and we're like, these people are insane. Their social media. It's not just, keeping up with the Kardashians. You get snippets. Oh, they're silly. No. Social media has captured that these people are nuts, that these people are just people. And they're just crazy people with a lot of money and who are overexposed. So now we're like, hey, you're kind of just a person. You have a lot of money. That's cool. But like, and it's cool to kind of see it and be entertained by it. But then when they're like, hey, you know who you should vote for? Like, I don't care what you vote for. You're really rich. We don't have anything that really we have in common. So no, I don't give a fuck who you endorse. So I think that was the first thing that struck me. That and most celebrities are either involved with Epstein or Diddy, and that's weird. And there's a lot of weird things going on in the celebrity world that I think everyone's kind of looking at celebrity world like, hey, can you guys please not take any moral high grounds? We've seen your tweets. We've seen your shady interactions. We listen to your music lyrics a little differently now. You know, I just don't think it pulls as much weight as it might have, right? Maybe if back in like the 90s you had like Tom Cruise endorsing somebody, it would have been important. Not important anymore. I didn't see anybody who's an adult. Maybe some 20-year-olds or early 20-year-olds might have been like that, but like I didn't have any 30-year-olds who were like, this person endorsed somebody. Like, I think I really got to change my ideas. Like, no. You know, if anything, it made people like double down on what they already thought because they were like, what does this mean to me? So that's my number 1. Number 2, in the same vein that you were saying, but number 2 is podcasts are king. You know, I think I'm not blaming any particular thing, but I think Kamala Harris should have done the Joe Rogan podcast. And the reason is the Trump podcast had, the last time I checked, had like, I would say like 48 million views. Like, that's huge. There's only 300 million people in America. He got that many views in like a few days. If he was smart, he probably would have done it earlier and given the whole country an opportunity to watch that podcast. Same thing with Kamala. Like, if you're not getting on the podcasts that are hours long, kind of like what you said, where it's like you can actually let people get a really solid glimpse of who you are in a one-on-one setting. Because that's the thing, like, doing an SNL or a skit or like something that's like scripted and like almost like a television show, like that's cool, but you're only going to get certain demographics. You're only going to get the demographics of people who think reality TV is like a real thing. Like if you're watching somebody in a podcast and they actually have to answer like unscripted questions and answers, one, you're actually going to be like, okay, this is what this person is like. So that's first and foremost. 2, like that is a more realistic style of how people interact. And it'll actually, I think, build a better connection with the audience, which in this case are your future constituents or voters. So I think podcasts have proven themselves to be king. And I'm not just saying that because of Joe Rogan. Because I watched a bunch of podcasts. I watched the Shannon Sharp podcast with Kamala, as well as I even watched and I don't watch her show ever, but what's her name? The Caller Daddy girl. I don't watch that podcast, but I listened to it because Kamala was on it, you know, and I think she maybe should have focused on a little more podcast heavy, because I know at one point that's something that Trump did. He just started jumping on podcasts. And I think that's what a lot of politicians are starting to do. I saw John Fetterman. He got on the Joe Rogan to like, I don't know if he has an election coming up or if he was running this time, but like, if you're trying to promote something, whether it's in politics or business, if you're trying to do it on a personal level, podcasts are the way. A lot of people are starting to listen to podcasts, and it's starting to become an easy way to connect with audiences. It's in an authentic way. And I think that is a thing that humans have always been looking for, authentic connections. That's why people used to like television shows the way they used to. They used to watch television shows could be like, oh, this is a family show. I can connect with this, right? Now, obviously, now we all know TV shows are fake, and they treat their cast members terribly. But I think people want to know the real version of people. 3, social media is actually very disillusioned. Social media is very disillusioning. And when I say that, I'll say my experience, and then I bet everyone kind of experienced this. Going into the election, I had a feeling, based off of the numbers that Trump's podcasts were doing, and some of the other things where like CEOs were already hitting them up pre-election, trying to build a relationship with them, that maybe the CEOs of these tech companies were seeing data from like what people are searching, maybe what people are purchasing online, that they were like, oh, Trump's going to win. And then when I'm looking at the views of who's getting what views, I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, I think Trump's going to win. When I went on election day, because of the people I follow, I saw a lot of Kamala Harris stuff. So I was like, oh, I misread this. Kamala Harris might have a landslide. I was sort of leaning that way. I was like, oh, well, Kamala Harris is gonna win. Like, that's what it is. I misread the tea leaves. And then Trump wins. And I bet if someone had a different algorithm where they had a different set of friends who were all Trump supporters, they made it be like, oh, see, I knew Trump was gonna win. Like, I think social media, especially depending on who you follow, can really shape your vision of what you think the outcome of something is going to be. So I would say my takeaway is, although social media is a powerful tool, it's not all-knowing. It's not the means to all ends. It's just a tool, and that we always need to keep that in perspective and look at the totality, especially when it comes to elections and politics, the totality of all of the things that we're seeing when we're trying to make an educated guess on who may or may not win an election. But those are my 3 takeaways.
And on the spot, it's a solid 3.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, you said you wanted to go to another topic. What did you want to hit up?
How much time we got left? Or
did you want to make this just a election pod?
Let's see.
Election reaction. Keep it clear.
You know what? We can do election reaction only because the other 2 topics have nothing to do with this.
I mean,
and it would be silly. And I feel like, I think this is good. We're almost an hour in. We're almost
what do you think we said everything there is to say about the election? Have we beat this one down?
I mean, I'm sure you could beat it a few more times if you want. I think pause. I think I don't know if I have anything else. I want people to treat each other better. I want this to go smoothly. I want a good next 4 years, regardless of whoever's president. Like, I don't have much else, but you may have more meat on the bone.
No, I don't feel like I've. Eugene, what's your? Give me real quick.
What
would you say, real quick, off the dome? Your biggest takeaway from the election? What was it?
Eugene hasn't paid attention to our whole podcast.
I think my biggest takeaway. This was an interesting thing. It was an interesting one. I'll say that. That was my biggest thing. I thought it was interesting.
Oh, yeah?
You thought it was an interesting
big takeaway.
This must have, what's actually interesting? This must have been a crazy election for kids. You know what I mean? Think about when you were a kid and you watched, like, the elections. You kind of knew what was going on, but you kind of didn't. Think about kids. Like, if you're in the range of, like, 5 to 9, like, just hearing that, like, you don't understand it, but, like, in your household, everyone's like, this is the end of the country, blah, blah, blah. Like, either way, like, kids are not getting a normal experience anymore. They're going to look back on this election when they're 20 years down the line, and hopefully things have calmed down by then and elections are a little more normal. They're going to be like, yo, I had a really weird one as a kid.
Yeah. I remember my weirdest election was the George Bush Al Gore one.
Al Gore one, yeah.
Because
George Bush Al Gore.
Because, like, they did a recount, and I remember my mom was like, "Oh yeah, they got to recount everything. This is like really stressful. Like no one knows who's gonna be president." And I was like, "Damn, they got to do it over again? Like this don't make no sense." But like, yeah, that's not like this one.
Yeah.
This one was a lot different.
If millennials' most stressful election as a child was Bush Gore, think about these generations, how they're gonna look back at their elections.
Yeah.
They're gonna be like, "You guys were weak. We were going through the Trump era. Like that was
Yeah.
some crazy times."
2016 was only trippy because like no one knew what to expect from Trump, so there was like it wasn't as crazy. The propaganda about like the end of democracy wasn't as crazy. It was more like World War III might happen, which is obviously a big threat in itself. But I don't know how many people took it to heart. Like think people take it to heart.
Like
now.
this one. I mean, they weren't. I don't
Yeah.
remember after 2016 families dividing over it
No,
or things
I don't
like
either.
that.
But I
Or,
do
like-
remember. I do remember, which I think is kind of funny now, is how everyone they clowned it, and then they were like, "Hillary's got this in the bag."
Yeah. Oh, it was the most uneventful election because everyone's like, Hillary has this in a landslide.
Yeah, and then when Trump won, like at least half the country, I know I was like, "What?
Yeah.
He won?" I was like, "What?"
Not half the country. The entire country.
The entire country was like shocked, and like I remember like so many people were like, "Oh my gosh, Trump is definitely gonna lose," and except for the people who supported him. They were like, "I'm gonna support Trump. Trump is gonna win." Da, 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 da. And I remember being like, "All right, like I don't think he's gonna win. Like I think Hillary's gonna win." And so when she won, or when he won, I was kind of like, "Oh, well that's weird." Like it was more of
as a
shocker.
child,
It was a shocker.
I don't think any of us thought when we looked at him. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Yeah, very interesting one, Eugene. Very interesting one
Yeah.
indeed. So, anything else you want to say on the pod?
No, I think that's
4
it.
more years till we get to do this again. In 4 years, we'll have the 2028 election results episode.
I
So
wonder
once
who's
every
gonna be
4
running.
years. Yeah,
I wonder who's
ooh.
gonna be running.
It'll be an interesting
It'll be an
scenario.
interesting
Very
scenario.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's a calmer one.
Yeah. Hopefully it's more chill. I can't imagine it gets crazier than this. Gotta be peak.
What a hook! Like that's what I'm saying. This was like a trilogy of
Yeah.
the Trump trilogy. Was everyone got crazier and crazier each time,
Yeah.
and now we're here. So what will the next trilogy be?
I know.
Anyway.
Anyways, shout out to Pope.